Welcome to The Change Agent, the podcast about leadership, project management, and paving our way to being successful. On each episode, we explore ideas, stories, and strategies that help leaders navigate complexity and inspire growth. We want to provide you with ideas to elevate your career and see beyond the glare. Whether you're leading a team or simply interested in developing the knowledge and skills to make you more valuable, then this is the podcast for you. We're very happy that you're here, so let's get right to it. Welcome back to The Change Agent, everyone. This is where we explore how leadership adapts in a world that never stops changing. We have so many topics to talk about, and I know that you're probably a little bit confused about the episode numbering. We'll worry about that later. I'm your host, Eric, of course, and today we're going to be unpacking a subject that sits really close to the center of the crossroads of work, culture, and identity. I was going through something the other day, just doing an errand, and I ran into someone, and during a conversation, this came up, and I wanted to do a podcast about it. It's generational leadership. This is a really interesting topic. So whether you're a Gen X individual, a millennial, Gen Z, or even if you're on the tail end of the boomers, you've probably felt something like this as we go through the discussion. These are the differences in how each of these generations approach how we work, what we value, how we lead. And sometimes you probably have noticed that these things can cause friction. Either it's from the older generation to the younger, or the older generation being managed by the younger. Other times they spark innovation. I mean, sometimes you can have the older guys like myself get really good ideas and employ them that you obtain from the younger generation. I do that constantly. So let's take a deep dive today into how leadership shifts across generations. And specifically, I want to be looking at what research says about work ethic, perceptions of the workplace, the visions of the future of work, all that good stuff. And I really want to put some research out there. And we're even going to talk about something I mentioned earlier. What happens when a Gen X person finds themselves reporting to a millennial or a Gen Z boss? Now, before we go any further, let's go ahead and clear ourselves up on what generations we're talking about here in those dates, because some people may not know, but regardless, let's do it. So when I say baby boomers, I'm talking about those people that are born roughly between the years of 1946 and 1964. And most of those individuals are retired or nearing retirement now, but their leadership imprints still remain strong, right? These are the individuals that when you're at work, they say, when back in my day, this is what I did. And they run a shop that mirrors those things. And so a lot of those experiences from baby boomers may be still coming across. Gen X are probably the most common. These are the middle child of generations between the year they were born between 1965 and 1980. They see themselves as independent, resourceful, and skeptical of authority. And then millennials, 1981, 1996. Purpose-driven, collaborative, and very tech-savvy. And then onto the wizards, Gen Z, 1997 and onward. Now, these individuals have been living in the digital age, so we call them digital natives. They are entering leadership now in their mid-20s, so they probably already graduated college, we hope, and they're trying to get into leadership in some way. And each of these groups that we've listed here was shaped by some defining event. Recessions, wars, 9/11, the 2008 financial crisis, and of course the COVID-19 pandemic, which taught us a lot of lessons of remote work. And all of those experiences shape how we work and how we view leadership and even how we lead. Now, I myself am a Gen X leader. Gen X leaders tend to value independence. And so let's jump right into my first bit of research. Now, a study from the Center for Creative Leadership found that Gen Xers are more likely than boomers to embrace collaborative decision-making, but less likely than millennials to push for a full consensus. Millennials often adopt a servant leadership approach, placing emphasis on mentorship, coaching, and inspiring rather than being a commander. And that's a big deal because I have just done a few things, releases, some reels, and maybe even a podcast on commanding. Now, Deloitte released an article, a survey in 2023 called the Global Millennial and Gen Z Survey, and that found that 44% of millennials believe that their employer's purpose is as important as the pay. Gen Z, on the other hand, is starting to lead with inclusivity and closeness, and they expect technology to be integrated seamlessly into leadership. And lastly, a Gallup survey revealed that Gen Z employees are 77% more likely than boomers to expect weekly feedback. That's a big deal. That translates into a leadership style that's highly interactive, feedback driven, and digitally enabled. So look, what does this even mean? There's a great bits of research. They're primary sources. You can get them out on the internet. They're reliable sources. But what does it even mean? It means that there are clear generational differences, even between you and someone like your dad. And the reason I bring that example up is because my dad and I had an interesting relationship, and I take a lot of what I've learned from those experiences as a child into my leadership style. When I was younger, I thought my dad was tough. He was unforgiving in the work, meaning be quiet and do it kind of thing. That's, if I was obviously bleeding, he took care of that. But if he was just trying to get me to work, he didn't want me to be sitting around on my butt all day. He expected me to be committed. He wanted excellence, and he wanted me to be responsible, right? And too often, though, as I grew through those teenage years, I truly displayed that I had not been listening. So, but now that I'm older, his lessons are definitely imprinted on me and how I lead, and so have my experiences. And so today, when I look at myself as a leader, I like to think that I'm a nice blend of kind of the boomers, the Gen X group, which is mine, and then the rest. Because I believe in taking the best from all of my interactions and placing that knowledge into my leadership toolbox. And I really want to talk about that today as we get through that leadership toolbox. But anyway, yeah, I think that my experiences have been the way I approached it was that I took the best of what my dad could give and people like him, and much of his crew were the same. He worked on a railroad. He had he didn't do executive work. He could have, but he preferred to stay on the line, slamming the hammers in the railroad ties and doing spare rails and all that good stuff, which used to be my nickname when I was little, because he was away doing a spare rail when I was born. Anyway, that's useless information. I think that the hard work, the commitment, and the drive for excellence are the things I took away from him. For me, it was collaboration, interdependentness, just trying to make sure that we work as a team. And then the digital part came from those who are younger than me that I've led that had really, really good ideas. And I just want to stop there for a second and pause on this really quickly before we move into the next section. Is that I think too often leaders don't look at their team regardless of their age, but let's just assume they're all younger than you and they have really good ideas. And sometimes you have this egotistical leader who says, do it my way or the highway. Well, obviously organizations don't grow with people like that in most cases. There are some times when someone may need to say that, and there's a valid reason for that. But in general leadership terms, my way or the highway does not work. It's a one-off, I'm telling you what to do kind of boss mentality. Many episodes ago, we talked about bosses versus leaders, and it's rare that you're going to find people getting motivated from someone yelling at them what to do because they said so. So just keep that in mind. And so I think that too often bosses, good managers, just managers in general, don't listen enough to the generation younger than us, if you're a Gen Xer, because they have good ideas and you're like, oh, and there could be many reasons for it. I'm too afraid to try it. I don't know anything about it. Take AI or programming, for example. I just recently, over the last 2 weeks, learned how to build iOS apps using Xcode with Cursor. And if you're not a programmer, you won't have any idea what that means. If you're an Apple developer, like I am, And I'm not a programmer, people. I took some ideas I heard from work from someone younger than me, and I came home and I'm playing with it. And why is that powerful? Well, one, I learned about it. Two, I actually got the thing to work, and I'm going to deploy it eventually on the App Store. And three, it gives me that depth in my toolbox that when I go and lead a team that has people that know stuff about this, or they are software developers, I'm going to have some clue of what they're talking about it. How much time did I invest in that? 2 days max. And I'm not a genius. Trust me. If you get it set up right, it'll do it for you. And so go out there and explore it. Anyway, I'm on a way off left field thing on this podcast. Let's get a little bit more into the podcast itself and what we're trying to get done here. So now we talked a little bit about work ethic. That work ethic may be a little bit different between these generations. I think the work ethic is really important to talk about because Gen X, for the most part, they really expect you to have long hours, reliability, and always being on call. And let me tell you, man, if that's not the truth, I don't know what is. I have a lot of friends who are around my age group that do that religiously. And I see the impact that it has on their family. I see the impact that it has on them personally if they don't have a family. The millennials, however, they tend to look at results more than hours. It's value driven. Hint, hint. You might want to start thinking like that. Efficiency, creativity, and continuous development are critical things that they put into their work cycles. These are the things that are important to them. And Gen Z, the work ethic includes protecting the mental health, flexibility, and demanding inclusivity. Now, it's really important that we understand that while these things all are important and they are all critical aspects for building a strong foundation in leadership, there are limitations to these. You can't have too much of any of them. Yes, you should have not long hours, but you should have the ability to be reliable, of course, always. But being always on call, no, not really. Don't need to do that. Results matter more than hours. It can, but remember, you also need to put in the hours to get good quality stuff, right? And then mental health, flexibility, and inclusivity all matter, but there's only so much that can be done in a workplace when it comes to that. And the best way to do that is to have that as part of your daily cycle, making sure everyone's okay. I've talked about that before. Hey, are you all right? Everybody doing okay? And if someone needs help, get them the help they need as soon as possible. Let's do another a little bit of research. According to a 2022 SHRM survey, don't know what that is exactly, but go look it up. 61% of Gen Z workers said that maintaining a work-life balance was their top priority when evaluating job opportunities. And compare that to 46% of Gen X who said job security was their number one. So obviously things that impacted them, the Gen Z versus Gen X, those things that they experienced in their lifetime in the core development portion, for the professional development portion of their lifetime, really drove what their answer was on those surveys. So is work ethic declining? A lot of people would argue yes. They'll say, oh, the younger generation doesn't want to do it. They don't want to do X, Y, Z, right? They're not working as hard as we are, says the Gen Xer. Or can we say that work ethic is evolving? And the truth is, it's really being redefined, I think, right? What boomers called loyalty, Gen Z might call rigidity. And what Gen Z calls balance, Gen X may interpret as entitlement. So the danger is when we assume our definition, meaning yours personally, is universal to everyone else around you. And so it's really important that you figure out how you personally define work ethic and figure out, does that definition of work ethic come from your generation or from your personal values? And this is why I want to talk about why my experience feels like a toolbox that's a mix of all of the generations. Because if I just sat there and said, I'm going to do what typical Gen Xers do, and I'm going to be demanding, I'm going to demand collaboration, and you're going to work long hours, and you're going to do X, Y, and Z, I don't think I would be successful as I am. I think I'm successful as a leader because I embrace the best of all of them, right? And so for me, work ethic is defined by all of those around me, not by what I do. Now, for the workplace, let's talk a little bit about the perception of workplace. Now, for Gen X, the workplace was often a physical place. Okay, you had offices in a building, you had cubicles, conference rooms, the typical workspace you think of. That got blurred during the millennial age, if you can call it that. Millennials blurred those boundaries by embracing more remote tools early on in their career. Remember, they built the gig economy, right? And software development and remote work and all these things kind of came out of that realm during that time. Now, Gen Z, however, often sees the workplace as anywhere you can open a laptop and you have connectivity to a Wi-Fi signal. Now, according to McKinsey's 2022 report, 70% of Gen Z respondents said that they would trade pay for a flexible work arrangement. I would do that too. I've offered that to people. As a Gen Xer, I've offered it because I truly believe in work-life balance. I really believe that. And if my employees and my teammates, they all expect that, and I see the happiness that they have when they have a really good work-life balance, I say, oh, I'm gonna do that too. And I would trade less pay for the ability to work remote. Now, obviously, there are certain limits to what you can and cannot trade, so be careful in those types of things. But this creates tension kind of in a hybrid workplace. A Gen X manager may prefer in-person check-ins in the office while their Gen Z team is perfectly comfortable collaborating through Slack or Zoom or something like that. Neither's wrong. It just requires intentional communication. And the reality is that currently my company that I'm working for, their hybrid policy is coming into effect this week, I believe, where they're requiring hybrid personnel who are designated hybrid, not remote, hybrid, to come into the office 3 days a week minimum. I don't disagree with it. I don't really agree with it. I don't even know. I'm probably because it doesn't apply to me because I'm an in-office guy, but that's just because of the nature of my work. But if you were to ask me my preference, I would be totally remote. And I wouldn't mind seeing people. I think that it's very good to put faces in front of each other. I think everybody should have that social interaction, whether it's a workplace event, formal work in the office on a Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, or going to 2-3 day weeks, and then the rest of them remote. And you might find, like what we did, is that the remote workers were performing, but the hybrid workers who at the time had the option to come in 3 days a week, or they didn't have to. They worked on weekends. They flexed their time. They would work a little bit on Monday and Tuesday. They'd get through their project. They'd attend all the meetings, and then they would deliver stuff on Saturday and Sunday. And then they might be off the next weekend. Who knows? However it worked. But it was interesting, the concepts of the perception of workplace. Now, where's the future of work really kind of going? Now, this is where the visions of the future of work really kind of start to diverge. Now, Gen X individuals typically envision steady jobs, whether it's in person or hybrid, with a technology as a tool that they use and not so much a replacement. Millennials, on the other hand, see borderless, flexible teams where skills matter more than titles. Amen to that, right? I agree with that 100%. Skills matter more than titles all day long. Gen Z now expects a seamless physical workplace. They use things like AI, automation, and even the metaverse. They're not so much future because they're expected to be norms, and I also embrace those things. Looking at a survey from 2023 by the World Economic Forum, it found that over 50% of Gen Z believed AI will significantly improve their careers compared to that of Gen X. Well, I'm part of that 22% of Gen X people that thought that because now I know. Because as I described earlier, I was able to open up Xcode, connect it to Cursor, and develop an app. Not only that, get it working on my devices and deploy it to the App Store. So the question is, how do we integrate those visions without leaving people behind? It's really important that you pick up the pieces from the best of everything you can find and put it in your toolbox. Okay? Now, let's talk a little bit about how these groups view each other, because oftentimes you're going to find relationships can be strained by the way that these things see each other, whether it's the Gen X not liking the Millennials or the Millennials thinking the Gen X's are complete, you know what? So Gen X often perceives younger generations as being entitled, right? Uncommitted, overly sensitive. Millennials, on the other hand, thinks that Gen Z and sometimes Gen X they're too rigid. You're a boss. You're too skeptical. You don't want change. You don't like it when things change. We've always done it this way. Okay. But there's a flip side. Gen X provides kind of this resilience and institutional knowledge of where things are. It's extremely important, people, that you understand that the way we work today and what we want to do in the future are just as important as how we've done it, because the history of how business has been successful. Look, when you walk, unless you're part of a startup, you didn't walk into a big company. Let's look at Deloitte or General Dynamics or Boeing. You didn't walk in that door and that company wasn't nothing, and then you walked in and it became a $95 billion company or whatever it is. No, that company had been growing for 100 years before you arrived, before I arrived. And they have to change with the times, right? So just understand that history is important. So the Gen Xers are important. They can tell you the history. Now, hopefully you've got a mentoring focused Gen Xer boss or leader or manager, or whoever's above you. You hope that they're teaching you the history of how we got where we are today, because it worked, right? The company is successful, hopefully. And this is what we need to change. Now, if it's not successful, figure that out and maybe put some younger leadership in there. Who knows? Gen X provides resilience and institutional knowledge. I talked about that. Millennials bring collaboration and purpose, and Gen Z injects the innovation and inclusivity. It's really important to understand how each of these bring powerful pieces to the puzzle. Now, the Harvard Business Review found that most innovative teams were almost generationally diverse. They were not diverse in age, but the willingness to listen to each other's perspective. Again, that's why I'm saying, even though I'm a Gen Xer, I take a lot of the Millennial and Gen Z type stuff with me and work that way with all of those people. And that's why I can connect so well with my team. It's not so much about the age than it is about the willingness to diversify yourself in the way that you lead. Now, picture this. This is something I talked about in the beginning. And if you're a Gen Xer, you're going to want to listen to this. Imagine a Gen X professional. I might be talking about myself as well. 25 years in their career, reporting to a 30-year-old millennial manager or even a 26-year-old Gen Zer. At first, you'll think, oh my God, it can feel strange. How can someone half my age manage me? But when both sides approach it with humility, it does work. Gen Xers bring experience navigating crises, conflict, delivering while they're under pressure. And younger managers can bring agility, new tools, and often courage to question the status quo, right? So they have the courage to question the fact that you've been doing it that way forever. One Gen X manager that I interviewed before told me at first he felt kind of insulted that someone younger would be put in charge of him. But then he realized that if my boss listens to me and I listen to them, then we both win. And the key to that part was that they had a partnership, not a hierarchy. And I think in many cases, a younger manager is going to be slightly intimidated by looking at someone older than them and saying, this guy's been around the block. He knows a lot, or maybe he doesn't. Maybe you haven't learned that yet. Maybe he's dumb as a rock. Who knows? But regardless, try to work together. It's a partnership. Teamwork makes the dream work. Is that what they say? So how do we make this work in real life? Let's go to that really quickly before we get ready to close this out for this weekly podcast. First, you want to make sure that you have clear, open channels for dialogue. Now, remember that not every generation values feedback the same way, so ask how they prefer it. I've talked about feedback in other podcasts. It's important that you're consistently doing this because it shows them that you're trustworthy. It shows them that you really care about how they're doing. Feedback and positive, constructive, sometimes hard feedback is important. Okay? Respect differences in the way pace works, how fast things get done, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Gen Z individuals tend to want feedback on a far more rapid feedback loop than a Gen Xer will. I might prefer, say, a quarterly review. You might prefer, if you're a Gen Zer, weekly review, weekly feedback. Maybe we can find something in the middle. Just do something every month. How's that? But really let other individuals kind of define that. And then you're going to want to do point number 3. 1 was creating open channels. 2 was respecting the difference in pace. 3, blend your digital and personal bits of tools. If you're Gen X, try embracing digital collaboration. I love Slack to death. If you're Gen Z, recognize that there's a value to occasional face-to-face conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, there is nothing that can beat sitting in front of somebody and feeling the energy in the room. You cannot do that with Zoom. You might get a sense of it, but you can't feel it. And so even though I prefer to work remote and I would absolutely have I'd get paid less for doing it, I still would prefer that social interaction. And point number 4, mentor both ways. We call this reverse mentoring, right? Reverse mentoring is powerful. It's also called managing the manager. If you are able to mentor on leadership as a Gen Xer, you're able to mentor younger leaders on leadership. I'm doing that right now with this podcast. You can create a really strong presence across your company, across your team, and across the group. A Gen Z can teach about digital tools and social inclusivity if that's something that's needed. And I think that many places, especially in the United States, that's becoming a problem, right? And so I won't get into politics, but man, part of that equation is under threat, isn't it? Social inclusivity. The power of combined people, regardless of where they're from, what they do, any of those things, any of those metrics, creates a much stronger team. Okay. Now, as we get ready to close, I just want to go over one more tip, a couple more things I want to think about. That generational leadership is not about who's right, who's wrong. It's about integration. The Gen X group can bring real pragmatism. Millennials can bring the collaboration. Gen Zs can bring the digital fluency. And they're not all competing values. They're complementary strengths. So think about that and how you can employ that in your leadership style and in your organization. The real question for all of us really is, are we clinging to something in the past or are we trying to build bridges? So keep that in mind as you get ready to go out and do your thing. And I'm sure that you're going to be able to take all of these great points and help improve the organizational climate and your leadership style. That's it for this episode. If you found it helpful, please subscribe to the podcast and make sure to leave a review and share the show with your colleagues and friends. And also provide us some recommendations on how we can improve the show for you. If you'd like more information on how to engage with us directly, you can find us on YouTube at Beyond the Glare, Instagram at Look Beyond the Glare, and you can also head over to our website, kalinavision.com, that's spelled Kalyn as in Nancy, -vision.com, and see how we can help you and your team get to the next level. Thank you for listening, and until next time.